Well, happy May the 4th. Let's get to the video. We're going to talk about 3D printing. Hey guys, welcome back to the channel. It's been a minute, but my family's been kind of under the weather, and we've been kind of repairing from the common flu. It's that time of the season. Weather's changing. A lot of us are kind of getting out of a funk, if you will. But as I said, happy May 4th. May the 4th be with you. If you guys haven't figured it out yet, I'm kind of a Star Wars nerd, and a lot of my family is too. Take after their father. So for May the 4th, what we're going to be doing today is we're going to be talking about 3D printing. And I'm sure a lot of you have seen the big honking machine in the background in some of my videos. Well, that's a 3D printer. And there's many things you could do with 3D printing. And once you get the 3D printer, which is fairly inexpensive depending on who you get it from, what type of 3D printer you get, but usually the most common 3D printer are made by Creality. So I'm sure a lot of you have heard of what 3D printing is. It's actually becoming more and more popular as the years go on and technology improves. As long as you're fairly competent with a computer and you know how to basically download a file and then put a file on, let's say an SD card or a flash drive, and then plug it into a machine, that's about as simple as it gets. Now, there's a little bit more complications to it, and I'll get into just a tiny bit of detail of how that works. But first, I kind of want to explain how I got into 3D printing, and some of the things that I've been able to do with 3D printing, not only for myself, but for my family as well. So I got into 3D printing because of my brother-in-law, Sean. Sean talks me into a lot of expensive endeavors, and I can tell you right now, one of these, this endeavor that he got me into has probably been one of the best purchases that I've ever made, because I've had a lot of fun with it, and it's definitely been worth it in the long run. Once I got the machine, I was capable of doing just about anything and everything with it, and making all kinds of things. And as you can see, he's made all kinds of things himself on his downtime. We both work full-time jobs, and it takes a while sometimes whenever you're working a job and you have a hobby as well, but it's always very rewarding when you get to come home and you just want to kind of get your mind off of things, and either whatever your hobby may be, like either painting, or whether it's playing video games, or just tinkering with things. It just kind of gets your mind off of things, and it's almost like a zen moment for you. But like I said, Sean's done a lot of things with his 3D printing. He started an Iron Man suit. I think he got about as far as the helmet went, because it was starting to get a little too complicated for him. But because he inspired me to kind of get a 3D printer, it inspired me to do far more with cosplay, if you will. Now, I'm sure a lot of you are wondering what cosplay is, and I'm not pretending to be a big cosplayer myself, but essentially it's just you dress up into a favorite character or costume, something either from a movie, comic book, whatever, and you get to show everybody else your creation. You made this costume, and a lot of people are pretty proud of it, because a lot of people put a lot of time and effort into it. And one of the things that I did was a variant of a Mandalorian costume. So to those who don't really know what Star Wars is, let me give you a little bit of a synopsis of what a Mandalorian is. Essentially, in the original films, there was a character named Boba Fett, and he was a bounty hunter. And, he was a descendant of a tribe that was called the Mandalorians. They were basically hunter, very skilled in martial arts and fighting, and they were kind of like a warrior tribe, if you will. and they had a very strong code, and they wore a certain type of armor that they were very, very proud of, one of which is their helmet. So if anybody's ever seen the show The Mandalorian, This Is the Way, then I'm sure you guys are very familiar with this type of style of helmet. So of course, being a Star Wars fanboy myself, and whenever the show Mandalorian kicked off, there was a lot of files that were being popped up all over the internet to be able to download and then basically make what I have today. And I kind of just fell in love with the way that this version looked, and I'm going to kind of go over some of the things that I did differently, and some of the things that I did the same, and some of the process and the trials and errors that I went through to try to make this costume, because it's not easy. Whenever you're making these 3D costumes, it is definitely a trial by error, and sometimes it can get frustrating. But at the end, whenever you do get the right fit and the finished product is done, I mean, as you can see, it looks very nice, and it's something that you can be proud of. So, like I said, there's a little bit of a more complicated process when it comes to 3D printing, other than just downloading a file and then plugging it into your 3D printer and then letting it do what it has to do. There's also a process called slicing, and basically what that is you have to have some kind of like 3D builder program on your computer, and from there you can either make it big, small, wide or skinny, whatever you want to do with it at that point. And it basically, after you do that, it turns it into a regular file, because when you download it, it's an STL. And I may put it up on the screen what exactly that means, but it's complicated stuff, and it doesn't really matter once you get the hang of it. Once you download it and you're able to just slice it, put it in the slicer itself, which is another program. You basically just download it from there, and then you put it into the 3D printer and it does its thing. So like I said, as long as you got some kind of basic 3D builder program to make it as big or small as you want, and some slicers actually are capable of doing that anyway, so you may not even need that program. There's going to be complications sometimes. It happens. It doesn't happen very often, but when it does, at the end of the day, you're just going to have to laugh about it, because sometimes your 3D print might come out as spaghetti, or it just doesn't happen at all. So some of the suggestions I might make for you is definitely have some kind of Wi-Fi camera on it. So like if you're at work and you're on break or something, or just have 5 minutes, you pull up your phone, you can check on your print, because the prints do take a while depending on what you're printing. Sometimes it may take 30 minutes, sometimes it may take 3 days, sometimes it may take a week, and it'll just keep on printing until it's done, or till the filament is out. So definitely have a camera on it at all times. Check on it periodically. And let's just say, for instance, that it does start to screw up. Well, that's where a smart plug comes into place. Make sure you have a smart plug, and then that way, if it starts to screw up and you need to turn it off immediately, boom, turn it right off, and that way it'll turn off, and when you get home, you can clean up the mess and then try to figure out what happened later. So once you get your file downloaded and you find what you want to print, speaking of which, what kind of type of things can you print? Well, you can print all kinds of things. You can print like teacups. You can print, accessories for your car. You can print, accessories for your desk. You can print, different parts for your house. You can print hinges. You can print if you could think of it, you could pretty much print it. I mean, there's even filament, which, by the way, filament is basically the plastic that goes through the machine, melts, and then causes the object to be made. So there's different kinds of filament. There's even filament that will even make almost like a rubbery material. So you can make like Crocs. I've seen it on Facebook. you can make Crocs out of 3D printing filament. So there's all kinds of stuff that you could do. And you just download that file, print it off, and then the fun part begins. So like I said, the thing I wanted to do, the thing I wanted to print the most was a Mandalorian suit. And there was a whole process to do so, and it took me a couple years to do it, because like I said, I don't do this for a living. I'm not going to sit here and pretend like I'm a professional 3D printer or a professional cosplayer by any means. So I definitely had to learn a lot of stuff by trial and error. But the further I went into my project, the more and more I learned, not just by like 3D printing, but some of the things that I can tweak and do to my costume to make it even cooler. For example, my helmet has a voice changer, and one of the things that I noticed too is like when I have all this equipment on, like it gets pretty stuffy, pretty hot, pretty quick. So one of the things I did was install a little CPU cooling fan inside of the helmet, and I just plug it into a battery, and then from there, it'll just blow nice cool air in my face for the next 2 to 3 hours. So that's pretty cool itself. One of the other processes that I have to go through is actually painting the print itself. So that could be somewhat of a process in its own aspect. So whenever you print your 3D print, a lot of times it will come out almost looking like there's like these lines going up the print. And the reason why that is because whenever you print your item, it basically, there's a board and then there's a needle. The needle goes back, forth, left, right, and the board goes down. So as it's printing, it's kind of going down and slowly building that 3D print as it goes around, or so on and so forth. So you're going to have what's called print lines, and you'll have to just sand it off over time. Use automotive filament or filling paint. Basically, it's just, you can get it at any automotive store. It's really thick primer paint, and you just spray it all over your print. Keep sanding it until you get it to a nice smooth surface. It's by far the part that I hate the most whenever I'm making any kind of 3D print. So I'm sure a lot of you kind of noticed that this has a nice little glossy look to it as well. Once I get it all painted up and everything, there was a clear coat paint that I used to kind of give it that nice shiny look as well, and it also gives it a extra protection against the elements as well. And you don't have to do that with all of your 3D prints. It was just something special that I did with my helmet as well. So as I went through the process, there was more and more stuff that I learned that I wanted to do to my suit. Like for instance, not only did I put a voice changer in here and I put a fan in there, but then I put this like neat flashlight right here that you would put on like a long rifle or a gun. And then I thought to myself, well, that looks pretty cool. How can I activate that thing? Because it's got a laser on it too. So what I ended up doing is that I learned how to basically solder wires, and I soldered a nice long wire through my arm, and I had it go right up to the palm of my hand, and I had a little button right there. So if I ever wanted to turn it on, I just push my palm, boom, light turns on, laser turns on. Don't have to reach for my helmet or anything like that. Just boom, light turns on. And as the years went on, the more and more I started finishing up my actual 3D print, there were some other things that I needed to do that didn't actually involve 3D printing. Like, I needed to find myself an actual undersuit, which a lot of people who do Mandalorian suits typically do flight suits underneath their Mandalorian costume. So that's what I needed to find, and that's what I ended up getting, was an all black flight suit that, you know, just seemed to match everything that went with the costume itself. So once I got the flight suit, once the 3D printing was done, once the painting was done, I just wanted to add little things here and there to the suit itself. Like, I wanted to add a nice little belt around the actual suit to kind of finish it off, put a nice little centerpiece to it. I added somewhat of a half cape to it as well. And, you know, something was missing, something else I needed to do. And if anybody knows any, like, you know, Mandalorian suit, you can't have a Mandalorian suit without a jetpack. So the jetpack doesn't seem as complicated as it sounds, but when I decided to add a jetpack to the actual costume, which the actual file that it came with did include a jetpack, so I wanted to complete the costume, and plus I wanted to do something really, really cool with it. And it was something that I don't think I've ever seen anybody else do as far as a jetpack goes. So one of the cool features that I wanted to do with my jetpack was add a fog machine to the actual jet streams. So there's two little rockets on my jetpack, and I wanted to somehow add a miniature fog machine where if I were to activate it, it would spew some smoke out of it, kind of giving it a really cool effect. And it's a nice talking point too, like, hey, watch this. Push a button, boom, smoke comes out of my, you know, my jetpack, and we can all talk about it. So basically, in a nutshell, what I ended up doing was taking an old vape that somebody owned. They gave it to me, and I essentially just, you know, I put little, like, regular vape juice in it, and I used a fish filter pump, which blows air, a couple of rubber tubes, and essentially once you turn it on, that fish filter will then blow air into the vape, going the opposite way, and then causing vape smoke to come out of those tubes. So it was a fairly simple machine and a fairly simple solution to me trying to be able to make a fog machine for my jetpack. That I've got the fog machine installed into my jetpack, I needed to figure out a way to how to turn it on. Pretty much I use the same concept of what I did with my flashlight. I just would run a wire through my suit, down my arm, but I wanted to kind of do it a little bit of a cooler way. I wanted to actually have something functioning that I can, like, press on my suit. That way I was like, hey, check this out, boom, push the button, and the fog machine would then turn on. So then eventually I installed somewhat of a switch, an on and off switch for the fog machine. I couldn't consistently have the fog machine running, otherwise the motor and the actual vape would just burn out. So it was something that was pretty cool. I could turn on for about 30 seconds, show it off to everybody, and then turn it right off, and it was a pretty cool effect. Now I got the fog machine done, I had to do something else with my jetpack. So I ended up wanting to put lights on it as well, which that was a fairly more easier process than the actual fog machine. I basically just found some LED lights. I drilled some holes here and there throughout the actual jetpack, and then I had a battery pack that would plug in, and I would turn it on before I would put on my suit, and it would stay lit for, I don't know, a few hours or so before it went dead. So, you know, now that you guys understand some of the complications to the actual suit, I'm sure a lot of you are starting to wonder, man, how hard is it to put all of this stuff on? Well, it's not exactly easy. Unlike in the movies where you see your hero putting on their suit with extreme ease and it just looks super comfortable and they're just like kicking butt and everything else, it's not exactly like that. And I'm sure a lot of you are smart enough to understand that, well, that's just Hollywood, and it's exactly that. So same thing with cosplay. Once you get your suit, now you need to put it on, and sometimes you're going to need some help. So my wife would essentially help me put the suit on. So for example, whenever we would go to like a Halloween event, I would walk around town with my girls in their costumes, and I would have this suit on as well. Or if I went to a Halloween costume contest. So I would basically wear half the suit, which would be comfortable enough to where I could actually just sit down in the car and then be able to get out. And then once we got to our destination, we would open up the trunk, and then we'd just start assembling the rest of the suit. So of course we have to run wires all throughout, my arms and everything else. We have to then strap on, a chest piece, a back piece, a shoulder piece, a head piece. There's all kinds of intricate little pieces that go with this. And, that kind of brings me to my next point. How does the armor stay on, your flight suit? There's different methods that anybody would use for any of their cosplay costumes, not just for Mandalorian like armor. But, there's usually two different methods, and that includes like either strapping it on or using Velcro. And I kind of did both for my armor. And, for example, for my thigh armor, I definitely used Velcro. I just slap it on there, it stays on there for the rest of the night. And then for my shin guards, I used somewhat of a combination of Velcro on my boots and a strap as well to make sure that it doesn't fall off. And then, I could walk for 3-4 hours and nothing would come apart. So at the end of the day, after like 2 years of work and being able to like put all this together, there was one costume contest that I did here in town, and it was pretty cool. It wasn't like the biggest costume contest in the world, but me and Carrie both won a $100 Kroger card. If you don't know what Kroger is, it's a grocery store. So that was cool. We got $100 worth of groceries for free, thanks to my costume. And, that was really, really, really rewarding, in my opinion, to be able to walk up on the stage, and there were some really cool costumes that went with it as well, and be able to just sweep the competition because of all the hard work and dedication that I did to my costume. So just to kind of name some of the other things that I've made with my 3D printer, to kind of give an example, I've made a sword, I've made both Mandalorian helmets for my kids, I've made them pencil holders, I've made Halloween decorations. There's all kinds of stuff that you could do with your 3D printer. So I hope you guys enjoyed this, more informational video. I thought it would be pretty cool to do something like this, especially on May the 4th, because one of my 3D printing projects was definitely a Star Wars project. And, kind of show you a little bit of what the 3D printing world is like, and some of the things that you can do with it, and some of the things that you can hopefully do with your family and make, great memories and make great adventures with them. So with that being said, I hope you enjoyed the video. Please like and subscribe. Keep chasing your dreams.